Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little lamb.
The fall. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
We'll march through the South, through the streets of Jackson, through the streets of Danville, through the streets of Cambridge, through the streets of Birmingham. But we will march with the spirit of love and with the spirit of dignity that we have shown here today.
John Lewis. He was jailed and beaten, but never bowed. The son of sharecroppers, he was one of the first freedom riders. Attacked by a mob and left for dead in a bus station in Montgomery, Alabama, he got back up and led the fight for justice. That was John Lewis. He always got back up and never quit. Surrounded and assaulted by hate, he rejected violence and embraced love. For over half a century, he showed us the true meaning of courage and dignity. Today, America is in another crisis, and a new wave of hate is once again embraced by the powerful to hold on to their power. In the days ahead, let us be guided by the courage of John Lewis. He never quit. He always got up. He knew a better day belonged to those who had the courage to act. Now it's our turn.
We must say, wake up, America, wake up, for we cannot stop, and we will not and cannot be patient.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Well, I can't stop crying. And Jessica loved John Lewis, too. She knew John Lewis. She followed John Lewis on Twitter. I was lucky. I knew John Lewis. I loved John Lewis. I respected John Lewis, and I knew he was sick. I knew he had pancreatic cancer, and I knew he was going to die. But I just joined the rest of America in saying goodbye to John Lewis, except for Marco Rubio, who said goodbye to Elijah Cummings. So Elijah Cummings has died twice this year. Last October, we lost Elijah Cummings, and Marco Rubio tweeted out his photo, and then he tweeted out his photo again when John Lewis died. But I will say, it's always kind of better to confuse the deceased with somebody who has already died than it is to confuse the deceased with someone who is still living. So it's just odd that Marco Rubio or his crack staff didn't notice, that Elijah Cummings apparently had died twice in the last year. So let's just say it was either Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz who confused John Lewis with Elijah Cummings, right? Because we can't tell those two apart, can we? And also, Dan Sullivan, a GOP congressman, he also mistakenly said goodbye to Elijah Cummings as the news of John Lewis's death broke. But then no one knows what Dan Sullivan looks like, so there. But, it's really disgusting and crazy that as hard as John Lewis fought for voting rights, as hard as he fought, as much of him as he gave to the Voting Rights Act, to making sure that people weren't disenfranchised in this here country as late as the 60s, the voter suppression has begun anew. Yeah, I mean, in this Shelby versus Holder, remember that in 2013? That case was the case where the Supreme Court decided racism was over. And so you didn't need states that had a very long track record of suppressing African American voters. They didn't need preclearance anymore, meaning they could put one polling place in a city of 800,000. They could move the polling place from the city to outside the city. They could do all kinds of things, purge the voter rolls randomly like they did in Georgia, all these things. They could do that without going to the feds and getting pre-clearance because of their heinous history in voter suppression. Well, we have it now again here in Florida. I believe it was on Friday, because I had the story over here, which was supposed to get on the show on Friday and didn't make it, but let's put it out there today because this is John Lewis's worst nightmare, and I'm so sad that on the day before he died, the Supreme Court made clear that his life's work is going to be undone, because the cruel fact is that Florida went to court to include a poll tax on voters who had served their time in jail. See, in Florida, we had this constitutional amendment. It was Amendment 4, and the voters were asked the question, should felons have their voting rights restored if they served their time and completed parole? And we all said yes. 2/3 of us said yes, and so it became a constitutional amendment here in Florida. Well, Ron DeSantis, right, and his ilk decided to go bring this to federal district court and to ask the court to bar Florida from enforcing our amendment, from enforcing, the law that we had chosen. And he said, well, if they haven't paid all their fines and court costs, then these felons should not be eligible to vote. And the federal district court said, no, we're not going to bar them from voting. And so DeSantis took it to the entire district court, the 11th Circuit. Now, on the 11th Circuit, there are 6 Trump appointees now. There's 12 judges. 6 of them are Trump appointees joining an already 7th judge who is a conservative judge. And they said, no, we're not going to let them vote. And the Supreme Court decided, we're not going to hear it. We're not going to hear the case. And so felons who haven't paid their fines, who haven't paid whatever the court ordered them to pay, cannot now vote. That's 1 million people in the state of Florida who are now suppressed, who cannot vote because of a poll tax, because they have to pay money in order to get franchise. Now, here's the kicker. Florida is so messed up. Our system is so dysfunctional that the state can't even tell people who want to or might be able to pay court costs or fines that they are supposed to pay how much they owe. Florida is so messed up, and people here who are trying to get unemployment, you know what I'm talking about. The state can't even tell people what they owe and will not be able to do so until 2026. 2026 is when the state of Florida believes it might be able to tell people who owe court costs what they owe, and then they might be able to. I mean, this is just so unbelievable. Meanwhile, voting while ineligible is a crime. So the felons who don't know how much they owe and won't know how much they owe until 2026, they know that they better not vote because ineligible voting is a crime. And they would get prosecuted in 2026. Can you imagine that? Rest in peace, John Lewis. Go Go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.